Yo, 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 what is going on, COD Familia? It is your boy BN, aka Mr. Kingdom Builder, and today we got some juicy drama for you coming out of 333, where we basically have a toss-up between one alliance who wants to go the Mega Alliance structure route, and then another alliance who wants to stay committed to what they thought was going to be agreed upon, going with a balanced alliance power route. So it is going to be interesting. I'm going to give you both sides. We're going to talk about the pros and cons, and also would love to hear if you've had a similar situation happen in your kingdom. Let me know in the comments down below. And as always, before we get started, if you enjoy the content, make sure you give us a big because it helps out a lot. So let's first give you a lay of the land here in 333. I'm going to show you some leaderboards real quick just so we can be on the same page. And if we go here, you will see that in this kingdom, and this is what I heard from a couple people, right, who said, boss, hey, this is a situation here. We'd love to get your thoughts. And I thought, oh, man, I'm just going to make a video on this because this is something that's very relatable to a number of kingdoms. And so here we have H0K, which is at almost 2 billion power. We have H0T, which is at 1.15 billion power, or 1.16, 1.2 if you want to be technical. And then we have HOE or H0E at 431 million power. And then we have the fourth alliance at HOC, I believe, at 237. And then two other alliances at 273 and 241. So the general story that I hear is that they were once four alliances in a family. And then they went from 4 to 2, which I can only assume is through player drop-off, probably through merging, most likely. And then now they have the top two alliances in the kingdom, and they're pretty much a cut ahead, right above 4 and 5 and those below. But now they have this situation where the initial, from what I'm hearing, right, the initial agreement or view was that, hey, we're all going to go in and have balanced alliances and have this approach for how we're going to work with each other and potentially distribute power. But now you have the number one alliance, HOK, who is advocating for more of a mega alliance structure, right? They want to be the main alliance, and then they want H0T to be the sub, right? Which usually when this happens, typically players from the second ranked alliance and below will usually try to funnel in or put in the strongest players into the number one alliance, right, if they're able to. Regardless if that may be their vision or not as HOK, this is typically what happens, is that usually you'll have as many strong players, right, to where, hey, look, if the number one alliance could fit the top 200 players in their alliance, I'm sure they would, right? And that's generally speaking for other kingdoms as well, even though that's not usually what happens at the end, even if it is still a decent amount that will go and ladder climb their way up. So I want to talk about real quick, what are the differences between running a balanced kingdom versus running a imbalanced kingdom, or one that has a little bit more of a kind of mega alliance structure that we may see. And right now, the challenge, let's first start off with this idea of, okay, are you going to run a mega alliance structure? So when you're doing this, which is, to be fair, something that is a common. It is an average way of doing things in kingdoms, but it also is an easy way out. And I say that because it's easy to condense. It's not easy to sustain and expand. And that's why often you will see kingdoms that will have, if not the majority of kingdoms right now, and that have been out in Call of Dragons, that typically take this POV for how they build out alliances in their kingdoms going into KVKs. Is they'll typically, almost all kingdoms usually have a power imbalance, and you have this funneling kind of ladder climbing effect of some people wanting to work their way up, and then at the same time everyone's trying to recruit. You only have a finite amount of people that you can pull from, especially when you start out in season 1 in your home kingdom, and eventually once the dust settles, which typically happens in the first couple weeks, you will have an idea on how things look. This is albeit merges or anything else that potentially happens, civil wars, etc. And so now you're in the situation where HOK and HOT are, and it's, okay, well, what do they do, right? Because if HOK in this situation is advocating for, hey, we want to do the mega line structure route, this is how we want to play the kingdom out, HOT is advocating for, hey, no, we want more balance, you're kind of at a crossroads. And you have to really figure out on what you're going to do, because this can very much turn into a situation where HOT just says, F it, we don't want to do that. And then they can either decide a few things, right? One, will they participate in the upcoming Season 2 KVK or will they not? 2, will they provide any form of support or will they not? And then 3, will they just migrate out at the end of the season Or will they stay and maybe see if things change? You don't necessarily have too many options as far as what you can do, but these can also lead to implications later on down in the kingdom, because if this is the way that the kingdom is being ran, you also have to think about how will other people view that depending on what they're looking for, right? Because I think it's safe to say that this idea of balancing out kingdom power is becoming more and more at the forefront. It is still very much a minority thought and a minority view in how kingdoms are, and I should say minority of a minority, to be clear, on how kingdoms should be managed, on how they should be structured. You typically will see, in 99% of cases, kingdoms that have an imbalance of power and are usually running a mega alliance, 1 to 2 mega alliances that are at the top. And then it's just kind of everyone else there spread out, just depending on how much for power differentials or differences. And when you now have something like the warband system coming into play, which is basically advocating to say, hey, you can have up to 4 alliances in your warband, it kind of gives you this idea. And we know that server capacities are going to be increasing from season to season up until like season 3, 4, whatever it may be, right? Where eventually they said it'll plateau out. You kind of get this idea that they want you to have more than one active alliance. But the challenge is that this is something that plagues Rise of Kingdoms. It plagued Infinity Kingdom. It plagues a lot of kingdom builders. And part of it is because there's just no guide. There's no guidebook, right? There's no guide on how to play. There's no handbook on how to play a kingdom builder. There's nothing that they tell you as the developers on, really for the most part on, hey, you should specifically play this way or that way. It's really just, hey, we've created this map and this plot of land and these mechanics for you. We're going to put you on this map and you just have to figure it out. And it kind of just becomes like a Darwinism thing, like survival of the fittest to an extent. And so now let's talk about the way of if they did want to balance, right? And if you did want to do something like, how could HOK work with HOT? Well, the situation is pretty simple, right? They would basically just work on trying to balance out power, which in usual cases is probably doing some player swaps where they send some stronger people to HOT, and then HOT potentially sends some lower powered players over to HOK so they can work on trying to get the power to be about the same. Now, why, and most of you know, I'm a very big advocate for this. I believe in power balancing, and it's the only thing I believe in, right? That doesn't mean that you can't have an active kingdom, nor a successful kingdom in its own way. By running a kind of mega alliance or an imbalanced power structure, it just takes a lot more work. And it's more of a grind and more of an uphill battle than I think is really necessary. And I also just believe that there's a lot more inherent benefits when you run a more of a balanced and a power balanced kingdom versus an imbalanced power kingdom. And so by doing this, right, that's kind of how they could get that done. And really, like I said, I very much am an advocate for that. I think I will give you one thing that I typically say as it pertains to power balancing is that if everyone feels in the kingdom that they have an opportunity to participate, to engage, to contribute as much as the others, you will have a healthier kingdom. The moment that you start isolating people from this feeling of, oh, I can't contribute as much, I'm not valued as much, they don't care about us as much. These psychological triggers that happen because of things like power imbalancing causes players to start thinking about, do I need to stay here? Am I better off somewhere else? You know what? I'm not going to engage as much. I'm not going to contribute as much now in like an alliance v alliance event. Or I'm not going to go hard in this event that's coming out. Or, you know what? They need some help over there. I'm sure someone else will take care of it. It always starts with a trickle. And that trickle can turn into a snowball. And this is why kingdoms have to be very careful about how they approach certain situations, because I'm telling you right now, the winds are shifting. And I'll give you an example, right? So when I played Infinity Kingdom, right, when I started that game back in Kingdom 4, I was always a big proponent of being open and having good discussions, healthy discussions about the pros and cons of managing and running kingdoms in a variety of different ways. And on this one topic of having balanced kingdoms having multiple active alliances versus imbalanced kingdoms with mega alliances, alliances, right? And talking about the differences there. I like to believe that I played a big hand, a significant hand, I'll say, in how a number of kingdoms viewed managing their servers, building healthy communities and environments for great day-to-day playing experiences for the people there. And there was a time when the two overwhelmingly strongest kingdoms, which I think was like 38 and 57 or something like that, if I even have those numbers right, pretty much ran a similar power balancing approach that I did in the kingdoms that I was in for, I think, like 36. I think it was 36 we were in, and then somewhere else that we were like 73 or something. And this was something that I would talk to people about in those kingdoms, even before they got big and while they were going. And it started becoming something that was adopted more and more by kingdoms. And there was a lot of valuable inherent reasons why. Like some of those top kingdoms lasted a very long time. And there's, again, valuable data and reasoning that points to why they were able to. And so this is all to say that it is kind of a sucky situation, right? When you are playing somewhere and you have two opposing sides that have two different viewpoints. And in their situation, I think someone told me that like one of the leaders there was not there anymore, or the founder, whoever it was. So it's like other people maybe had to step in to certain roles, and that obviously can change things, right? Because typically when you're doing a project, you usually hope and you're banking on the people that are filling in those leader positions or officer positions that are going to be staying, mostly R5 and above positions that are going to be staying there for a while. And anytime you have someone that's coming up that's new, do they really believe in the project? Do they believe in its core values? Do they believe in its goals? Are they really faithful? Do they understand why we're doing things a certain way? And those are some of the most important things. And part of that also factors into your project prep, right? What are you doing before you actually get into the kingdom? And that's a whole other thing I could talk about as well. But in short, that changed. That outlook changed apparently after this lead left, or some new discussions came about, however it arose. And this is where they are now. And so I'm curious to hear from you out there. Is this something that's similar to you? Have you had a situation like this occur? Maybe something that's different, but it's still relatable? And what happened, right? Were you playing in an alliance, and maybe that alliance decided, you know what, we're not going to participate, we're just going to leave? If so, was it because of something similar or something other that happened that made your alliance feel like that's just not the way we want to do things? Did you just have no problem saying, look, we'll just go ahead and be the academy or the second or the sub and kind of, fall in and support whatever the current regime is deciding for the direction to go in? And then did you find out that you were enjoying that? Or did you come to maybe resent it because you stayed longer than you should have? I'd be really curious to hear for any of you that have some stories to share. This to me is one of those big, and I find very fascinating topics in how people approach certain things and what people are willing to kind of put up with versus how long will you stay there? Will you just put your foot down and say, no, this is what we're going to do? And obviously in this case, both HOK and HOT have decisions to make. And so it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. And if we do eventually find out how it goes, maybe we'll do a follow-up to this as kind of like, hey, this is how it ended up in 333. But again, I mean, this is massive because depending on what's decided, it can very much change the overall direction of the kingdom and where it goes. And so, yeah, I'll be paying attention, and I'm sure I'll be keeping up with some people there. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. That's going to do it for me. As always, until next time, I'll catch y'all later.